Hello everyone. In this video, we will be solving radical equations, specifically square root equation. Please remember that if we are given square root of x is equal to a, if we get a positive square root of x, the a should be positive. If a is negative, then the equation has no solution. So let's take this first example right here. The first step in order that we solve for square root equation is to isolate the square root expression by itself on one side. So as you can see here, this square root of x plus 2 is already isolated by itself on one side. So then we can go ahead and solve for the x on this problem here. Since our a here is negative 3 and this is a positive square root of x plus 2, so then we can go ahead and say that this equation right here has no solution. So it has no solution because our a is a negative. At this time, I would encourage you to pause this video and try this problem out on your own. And when you're done, unpause it and check your answer. Okay, so we go over the problem here. Again, our first step is to isolate the squared expression by itself on one side. So as you can see here, the square root of 3x plus 4 is not isolated by itself because we have a negative 2 on the front of it. So what are we going to do here is we divide both sides by negative 2. Divide this by negative 2. So then we are left with square root of 3x minus 4 equals negative 5. So at this time, we already have isolated the square root expression by itself on one side. But as you can see here, we have a negative 5. So our a has to be positive. If a is negative, with a positive square root on the left side, so then we go ahead and say that this equation that we have here has no solution. Again, this one has no solution because both a's are negative. Did you get the same answer as this? Good. Perfect. Now let's move on to the next example right here. At this time, I would encourage you to pause this video and try this problem out on your own. And when you're done, unpause it and check your answer. Okay, so we go over the problem here. The first step is to isolate the square root expression by itself. So as you can see here, it's already isolated by itself on one side on the left because there are no other variables or numbers that's in front or at the back of this square root. So then we can go ahead and move on to the second step. The second step is to square both sides and solve. So the antidote for square root, or in order that we can undo the square root, we're supposed to square it. So I'm just gonna rewrite that down here. So that is square root of 2x minus 5 is equal to 1. Again, the antidote for to undo the square root is squared. So I square one side and I square the other side to make them even. So as you can see here, the squared and the square root gets crossed out. So we are left with 2x minus 5 equals 1 times 1, or 1 squared would be 1. And then we are going to solve. That's part of the second step. So from here, we can go ahead and add 5 to both sides plus 5. So then we can cross the 5 out. We're left with 2x equals 6. We want to solve for x. So then we go ahead and divide both sides by 2. Divide this by 2 here. So then we can go ahead and have x is equal to 3. So our value for x on this equation is 3. The third step is to use the original equation to check your answers. It's very important that we check our answer so that we're able to see if this x value here is correct. So we go over by the way, just a reminder that others are gonna ask, like, why were you able to solve it? But in the first example that you did, you said that there was no solution to it. Because remember, both a's here are negative, but the a here is positive. So then I went ahead and went through all the rest of the steps. But in the first two examples, we stopped and we said no solution to it since the a was already negative. So then we go ahead and check this equation, the answer that we have right here. So we are going to check this. We let x is equal to 3. So I'm going to write the original equation right there. That's the square root of 2x minus 5 equals 1. Again, the trick in checking our answer if it's correct is to change the variables into a parentheses before we plug in the values. So in this case right here, I'm just gonna go ahead and change the x into a parentheses. So 2 parentheses minus 5 equals 1. Please be careful that the 1 should be outside of the radical or the square root symbol, as you can see right there. So I don't have to make it all the way right there. So then from here, I go ahead and plug in the 3 to see if it works. So then I go ahead and simplify this. That's 2 times 3 is 6. Minus 5, is that equal to 1? So we're not sure of it yet. So then we have a square root of 6 minus 5 is 1. Is that equal to 1? Square root of 1 is 1 is equal to 1. So that means 1. This means that 3 is the solution to this equation right there. Did you get the same answer as this? Good. Perfect. At this time, I would encourage you to pause this video and try this problem out on your own. And when you're done, unpause it and check your answer. Okay, so we go over the problem here. Again, the first step is to isolate the squared expression by itself on one side. So as you can see here, there's a negative 2 in front of the square root expression. So what are we going to do is we clear this out first. It should be square root, and then the expression 3x plus 4 should be left over on the left side. So then we go ahead and divide both sides by negative 2. So I will divide this by negative 2. I divide this by negative 2 here, so I can cross the negative 2 out. So I am left with square root of 3x plus 4 equals 8. Negative 8 divided by negative 2 is a positive 4. So as you can see here, we can move on to the next step since we have a positive a. So if this were a negative a, then we can go ahead and say that there's no solution. But since this is positive, we go ahead and move on to the second step since we already isolated the squared expression on the left side by itself. The second step is to square both sides and solve. So we are supposed to square this because the antidote, or to undo the square root, is to square it. So I'm just going to square both sides. So then this squared and square root gets crossed out. So we're left over with 3x plus 4 is equal to 16 because you have 4 squared is 16. So then we go ahead and solve. We want x by itself, so we subtract 4 from both sides, minus 4. So then we are left with 3x is equal to 12. So then we divide both sides by 3. We divide this by 3. So then we are left with x is equal to 4. So this is the solution to this equation that we have up there. Now the third step is to use the original equation to check our answer. Again, it's very important that we check our answer because sometimes there are cases when the x that we've solved, we did all the math, but then for some reasons it doesn't really work. So we have to check our work. So we are going to use the original equation in order that we can see if this 4 works for this. So we're gonna let x is equal to 4. So I'm just gonna rewrite it. So it's negative 2 square root of 3x plus 4 is negative 8. Again, the trick in checking our work is to change the variable into a parentheses before we plug in the values. So then I go ahead and change this to parentheses and plug in 4 to it. So as you can see here, both are equal to negative 8. Because you have negative 2 times 4 because the 4 was the square root of 16. So negative 8 is equal to negative 8. So that means 4 is a solution to this equation right there. Did you get the same answers as this? Good. Perfect. Now let's move on to the next example right here. At this time, I would encourage you to pause this video and try this problem out on your own. And when you're done, unpause it and check your answer. Okay, so we go over the problem here. Again, the first step is to isolate the squared expression by itself. So this one should be isolated by itself on one side. Since we have a negative 4 and 3 around the square root expression here, we need to clear these two out. So that means we are supposed to add 4 from both sides plus 4. So then we go ahead and we're left with 3 square root of x minus 2 is, we cross it out, is equal to 6. So then from here, we still have 3 right here because again, the target is to have this square root expression by itself on one side. So then we go ahead and divide both sides by 3. I'm going to divide this by 3 so we can cross the 3 out. So we're left with square root of x minus 2 is equal to 2. So as you can see here, the squared expression is already by itself on one side. So then we go ahead and figure out if a is negative, then we go ahead and it has no solution. But since a is positive here, so we go ahead and move on to the second step. Square root both sides and solve. So in order to undo the square root, we are going to square both sides. So square both sides and solve. So then from here, we can cross these 2 out. So we're left with x minus 2 is equal to 4 because 2 squared is 4. So then we're going to add 2 to both sides plus 2 and plus 2 here. So we are left with x is equal to 6. So this is the value of this is the solution to this equation that we have up there. And we are now ready to move on to the third step. The third step is to use the original equation to check if this x equals 6 would work to this equation right here. So we let x is equal to 6. So then we go ahead and rewrite this one down here first. So that's 3 square root of x minus 2 minus 4. Please be careful. The minus 4 should be outside the square root, and that is equal to 2. So then we go ahead and use the trick in checking, that is to change the variable into a parenthesis before we plug in values. So I'm going to change this into a parenthesis and put in the 6 and do the math. So as you can see here, both are equal to 2. So then we go ahead and say that this x equals 6 is a solution to this equation right there. Did you get the same answers as this? Good. Perfect. If you find this video helpful, hit like and subscribe for more math videos. See ya!